Well, you have found us terrific hockey content once again. It's called Wooden Sticks. We are recording from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. I am your host, Kevin Gorg. Appreciate you taking the time to find this podcast. Looking forward today to a conversation with one of my good friends in the business. He is Dave Schwartz. He now works for the Minnesota Wild, but for many, many years in this market here in the Twin Cities, he was the one of the lead sports anchors at KARE 11, our NBC affiliate. He is a lover of the game of hockey, and so we've got a lot to catch up with Schwartzy today. We're going to talk about his background growing up in New York, how he ended up in this market, and what he does now with the Minnesota Wild. So it's going to be a really cool conversation with Schwartzy today, and a fun time to be having a conversation with a guy like Dave Schwartz because he's been to multiple Olympic venues, and this week kicked off the Four Nations face-off. And for all of us that love the game of hockey, and why else would you be here listening to Wooden Sticks unless you had that passion for the game? We got paid. I got to tell you, we are recording this on a Thursday morning, the day after what was just a spectacular game between Sweden and Canada to kick off this tournament at the Bell Center in Montreal. And, you know, we saw the rosters, and they've been hyping this thing for months, and skeptics were like, well, is it going to be like the All-Star game? And I'm like, come on, man. The All-Star game is pretend hockey. It doesn't even count. This is a different deal. You're talking about the best players in the sport representing their country on the biggest stage. So I had no doubt it was going to be really, really good and incredibly intense. But then when you get a game that we got, like we did in that opening game, that Canada, as the prohibitive favorite in that game and one of the co-favorites in the tournament, took charge of early, scoring, I think, in the opening minute or two on power play, a power play which featured Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and Cale Makar. Like, those four players right there are four of the best 5 or 6 players in the world right now, and they're all on the ice at the same time for this power play. Predictably, it took them very little time to go tic-tac-toe and bank that in the net behind Wild goaltender Philip Gustafsson. But then the fans in Montreal, the passion that we saw, Sweden coming back in the hockey game, seeing a guy like Jonas Brodin, our very own Wild defenseman, score that first goal to get Sweden in the hockey game, and eventually watch Joel Eriksson Ek tie that game up. Gustafsson making incredible saves along the way as they went into overtime, and then were treated to 3-on-3 hockey, which, you talk about fast-paced. I mean, the game itself was incredibly fast, but then you magnify that in 3-on-3, and it was quite the spectacle. Mitch Marner eventually gets the overtime winner. Crosby gets the 3 assists. He's the number one star, and by the way, he's still the one. I tweeted that out last night. I'll stand by it. This guy at age 37 still has it, and I think maybe last night shows you that Pittsburgh, the cast around him isn't quite what it used to be. But my God, when that guy is out there playing at the highest level, just a fierce competitor and leader. Undefeated now in 26 straight games representing Canada. The golden goal, which Schwartz and I are going to talk about here today from Olympic days gone by in Vancouver. This is a remarkable, remarkable player. And outside of Wayne Gretzky, the best I've ever seen. And nobody will top Gretzky for me. No matter what records are broken, no matter what happens, he will always be the best hockey player I ever watched with my own 2 eyes. But Sidney Crosby, not far behind, and that was just so much fun. And we get to watch this now unfold. Tonight we'll get paid with the United States, Boldy and Faber making their tournament debut, and it all sets up as the venue rotates from Montreal to Boston next week. And I think as it winds down and we get to that championship game, I believe it's going to end up being U.S. and Canada, but the Swedes showed last night that they are right there and capable. And even though the star power up front isn't what Canada has, they have the type of team, especially on that blue line led by Hedman and Brodin, their top pairing, that can adjust and hang with just about anybody. So it's going to be great to watch and see it unfold. And really looking forward to seeing that Four Nations play out. And so that'll be a topic of conversation with Schwartzy. And we'll get into high school hockey here, too, in the state tournament. As we sit here right now, section playoffs are about a week away. I am attending a game this weekend down in Northfield. My dear friend Mike Luckraft, who was on the show a week and change ago, has his Northfield Raiders in the top 5 in Class A. They're going to take on Delano this coming weekend, which should be a really, really good battle in Class A. I want to say Moorhead's coming down to take on Hill Murray at Aldrich this weekend. If you're a fan of high school hockey, this is the time to get out and see these games and then into section play. You can talk about the state tournament, and it's unbelievable, and it's the pomp and circumstance and the 19,000. But think about what lies ahead here in the next couple of weeks in the Twin Cities. If you can get out to see a couple of section final hockey games, to me, that is the most pressure these kids will ever play under as high school players. Because when you get to a section final, every kid that puts on skates from the time they were 5 or 6 years old starts to dream about playing in a state tournament. And that particular night of the section final, 2 teams show up, and one team is going to end up seeing their childhood dreams come together and as a group punch their ticket to the big show that is the tournament. The others, many of them seniors, are going to see their high school careers and their dreams come to an end. And that is all culminating in front of these jam-packed local arenas, places like Braemar, Parade, Aldrich. It's incredible the drama that can unfold in these section finals. So do yourself a favor and get out and see them, because there's nothing quite like it in the state of hockey. And I'm really looking forward next week to getting out and seeing some playoff hockey at the high school level. So lots to talk about on the show. We're going to get to Dave Schwartz, but first of all, I got to thank my good friend, John Schwartz, and all the work that he does with the Freemasons. And when you hear the Freemasons, you think of the secret handshakes, the pancake breakfast, the secret handshakes, and all the unusual hats that they bring along to that party. But I like to think about the things they do right here in our community at the Masonic charities, like the Cancer Center, the Children's Hospital, and the home over in Bloomington, which was a staple during COVID, saving all kinds of lives. They're just a few examples of the important work that Freemasons support right here in Minnesota. It's the largest fraternal organization in the world, and I'm so thankful that John Schwartz and Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Wooden Sticks as a platform to preach what they do. So many good things here in the Twin Cities. Want to thank our dear friends at Onyx Fish and Onyx Maps. Always a great time to be out ice fishing. Make sure you follow Onyx and get involved with what they're doing.
We've told you about Onyx Hunt. Now let me tell you about Onyx Fish. Ice fishing is here, and it's time to hit the frozen water with Onyx Fish. The Fish app is the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on ice. Use Onyx Fish to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. Onyx Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download Onyx Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onyxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
And right now, we're going to hear from one of our newest partners, my friends over at Insight Brewing. Hey, thank you to our new partner, Insight Brewing. They are located over in Northeast Minneapolis. The Insight Tap Room features 25 tap lines of rotating beers, THC seltzers, non-alcoholic beverages, local food trucks, and so much more. Insight has a 120-inch projection screen, and they will be showing all of the Minnesota Wild games throughout the season. You can also join Wooden Sticks at Insight Brewing at the Tap Room once a month for live shows featuring special guests, watch parties, hot takes, and of course, cold beer. You want to guarantee your seat? I got good news there too. Visit insightbrewing.com to request a free reservation. For a full list of other events, the food truck schedule, new beer releases, and more, follow at Insight Brewing on your favorite social media platforms and stay up to date. Thank you again, my friends over at Insight Brewing. We're back on Wooden Sticks, recording as always today from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Always excited to talk to my dear friend Dave Schwartz. Schwartzy, thanks for being on the show.
Dude, it's always a pleasure. Good to talk to you, KG.
You and I share a lot of the same passion for the game of hockey. And, you know, before we get into the the long form story of how you ended up at Carroll 11, how you ended up with the Minnesota Wild, just from a fan's perspective, seeing this Four Nations thing come to fruition last night, the first game of the tournament. As we record this on a Thursday, we got to watch Sweden and Canada battle last night. Your thoughts?
I love it. I think it's so much fun. And I'm an Olympics buff, so this is kind of right up my alley. But anytime you can take the best players from the best league that we have in the NHL and put them all together and give it some meaning. I feel like this tournament is different than other ones because there really is meaning. It's not the same as the NBA's in-season tournament. It's different. You're not playing for your country. You're playing for money, and that's great. But this is about country pride, and it means something for these guys. For Brock Faber and Matt Boldy, who have certainly represented the country at different levels throughout their careers. It's exciting to put on that sweater, that Team USA sweater, or for others, that Sweden sweater, So there's got it's a little more ratcheted up just some, and I think we've seen that there's some skin in the game, and they do truly want to win this thing for the pride of their country. And so I think it's awesome. I think it's fun. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's being well executed.
Yeah, I was blown away last night. I knew it'd be good. I had no doubt that these players were going to put everything into it. Just from talking to some of the guys here in the months leading up to it, I knew they were going to take it serious. They were going to have the right frame of mind. But then to see it play out in a place like Montreal at the Bell Center, where the fans truly appreciate the history of the game, and then to see the best on best go head to head like that, it was drama from start to finish. It had everything you hope for. And I think what was really the coolest aspect of the first game of this tournament is the old guard is still pretty damn good. And I mean Sidney Crosby. We've heard all about the McKinnons and the McDavids, and ironically, they're all on the same team here, the argument for best player in the world. This guy has been and continues to be the face of the National Hockey League. And I think last night, that opening game against Sweden reminded all hockey fans that 87 still has it.
We've said this, and I know you and I have talked about this before, Kev, that you can't manufacture or build up a clutch gene, right? Either you have it or you don't. And nobody is better at that. Nobody, I think, than Sidney Crosby. And I mean, like, you think back to his time playing the Olympics for Team Canada, that huge goal that he had. And I want to say it was 2010, maybe. Am I remembering the year the right way?
2014 Vancouver, or was it 2010
14.
Vancouver?
It was I thought Vancouver was 2010, but
you might be
14
right.
was Sochi. I remember that. 14 was Sochi, so it was 10.
So it was 2010.
Yeah, and he scores the huge goal. I mean, like, you just can't fake that. Like, guys, athletes have to have that, and most of them do at the NHL level. But Crosby, he's a student of the game that he honestly. He's one of the nicest guys. I had a chance to talk to him a couple of times when I was still in television, and he was very nice, very kind. But he's a student of the game. He takes it seriously. He's got some longevity. The thing that amazes me the most is that he and Alex Ovechkin were the same draft class, right? I mean, think about that you got two of the greatest players to ever play the game were in the same draft class. Now we're lucky if we get one guy. Was that, am I right? Is it the same draft class?
It is. And, and that's the big argument. People have talked about the rivalry between Ovechkin and Crosby all over the years, and they're different types of players. But, to see, maybe the greatest captain, playmaker, clutch guy in Crosby, and along with that, maybe the greatest goal scorer. Gretzky,
yes,
for me, will always be the best of everything. But, to see what Ovechkin and Crosby have done, carried that torch now into their late 30s and been such unbelievable ambassadors for the game of hockey. And then watching that game last night where you see the combinations, the power play happens a minute into the game and you've got McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, and Makar all on the ice at the same time. And it's
what a power play.
And you knew they'd score, right? It didn't take them long. Yeah. It was incredible.
Can you imagine? I mean, they're the best of the best. But the thing is, though, and this, that these guys haven't really had a ton of time to practice together, and it does take time. Yes, they're great. Yes, greatness can figure it out. But you got to know the timing. You got to know if I make this pass, is that guy going to be there? Is he going to be on the back door? Where is he going to rotate if I go down low? Those kind of things take time. Now, these are the best players in the game, so they figure it out. But the fact that there was, you're right, very little rust. I mean, looked like a team that had been playing together for years, and they just make it work. And what an unbelievable power play to have. Could you imagine being a coach and saying, okay, who's going to play top there? Is this going to be McCarr or, what a choice to have. So not surprising that it works well, but at the same time, it says a lot about these guys and their game that they can be plucked out of one situation, thrown down in another with the best of the best and just make it work.
And from a Wild perspective, all of us were excited to see how it would play out last night. Canada rightfully favored in that game, but Sweden hung right in there. And then the three guys that are representing the Minnesota Wild start with Gustafsson in goal, move out to Brodin, who scored the first goal of the game for the Swedes,
Yep.
and then the tying goal scored by Joel Eriksson Ek. From a Wild perspective, on the side of Team Sweden, that game couldn't have gone much better. Yeah,
you love it, right? All three of our guys contribute and play well. Not a surprise because they're there for a reason, but I've been pleasantly surprised with Brodin and how he's come back after missing some time. Ek is, Ek doesn't get enough credit for being, I don't think he gets enough credit around the league for being just the tough, hard-nosed goal scorer that he is. Everybody knows him as a guy you love to play with and don't want to play against. But he can just score goals. And he just does what has to be done. He's a strong guy. People don't realize how big and tough he is to move around and to try to stay with. To have his size and his speed, he's just a goal scorer. And Gustafsson is just seeing the puck so well this year. It's obvious he sees everything, and he's just having a phenomenal year for us. So, yeah, great to see all three of them contribute. You love it, and hopefully our fans are watching and enjoying it as well.
Yeah, I think as a fan of this team right now, if you're sitting back watching the Four Nations and you saw Sweden in that first game, we're going to get treated this week and into the weekend to the USA squad. You already mentioned Brock Faber and Matt Boldy. And I look at this, taking a step back and being somebody that grew up watching the North Stars and having been to a couple of Stanley Cups, and the North Stars made a couple of great runs, including a run in 91 where they had the lead within that series against Lemieux and the Penguins and couldn't close the deal. And I always think about it pragmatically, like, is this group the group that finally breaks through? And the more I look at the core of this hockey team and look what's coming with some of the young players, starting with Zeev Boyum at Denver right now, playing college hockey still for the Pioneers, I feel in my heart of hearts, Schwartzy, that in the next, maybe it's 1, 2, 3 years at the most, this group is going to make a run at the Cup. And I've been doing this for 19 years, and I haven't been able to say that very often, but I truly believe that that's going to happen. And nights like last night, when those guys are on that big stage, and again, these are core players on the Minnesota Wild, in an event like that at the Bell Center, it reminds me that we have the right group to get that done here.
I agree. Sports, and this, your winning comes in windows, right? You have a window of when you might be able to win that championship, and either you're just outside the window, you're in the window, or the window's already closed. I've felt for many years that this franchise, even before I got here, was out of that window, and that window I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't feel like they were anywhere near it. But now you look at the roster, the way it's constructed with some of the young guys, some of the guys that are coming and who they've drafted, it certainly does seem like the window is open and the Wild are ready to step through it. Imagine what this what that D is going to look like when you have to decide between Brock Faber, Zeev Boyum, or Jonas Brodin, who's your top two. I mean, what a decision. One of those guys is going to go on the second pair. That's incredible. And then, what's going to happen here when the buyouts are over and there's some more money to go add in some more talent. Kirill Kaprizov has proved that he is one of the best in the game. When he's healthy. I think Marco Rossi has made a giant step this year. I swear every time you see him on the ice, he looks better and better. So they've got that combination, I think, of great talent now, great talent coming, and then another group around that, some of these older guys who understand their roles and understand that they're not top line, and that's okay. They're good being third and fourth liners. And you know as well as I do, Kev, that in the postseason, those are the guys that score the goals.
Correct.
Because when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, your first line and your first line, if you're doing it right, are probably going to cancel each other out. And so then it comes down to the third line. Can you get those goals? Can your third line be better than their third line? And so when you look at that depth, I think that we have and that's coming, there's no way not to get excited about it. So I agree with you. I think 1, 2, 3 years here, you certainly hope that a cup's coming to Minnesota, because it does seem still odd to me. I was at the game the other night talking with a friend of mine. I said, gosh, it just seems so silly that the state of Minnesota, the state of hockey, doesn't have a Stanley Cup yet.
I got to ask you, since the entire Wild offices will be a part of that parade that heads down West 7th, where are you going to be? What float are you going to be on? Who are you going to be with? Yeah, because you have to dream about it, right? Like, you have to at least think about it. I'll be lucky enough to be near that Panther, that Anthony LaPanta. He'll be purring somewhere, and I'll be right with him, trailing along. But will you be with Fallness, you think?
Oh, gosh, why would I do that? That seems like a terrible way to – no, I'm just kidding. You know what? My guess is knowing this organization, and I mean, obviously, I love being here. They treat everybody well. My guess is we'll have some sort of employee area, either a float or a spot to just watch. And I love that. I will love to be just sitting there enjoying it. It'll be great. Obviously, Craig Leopold wants a Stanley Cup. He's done everything he can, and he will continue to do everything he can to get a Stanley Cup. And it'll be fun to see what that looks like once it happens. And so I'm just going to be happy to sit there and witness the history and let it happen, and understanding that not everybody gets the chance to watch a Stanley Cup come to their home state. And so I'll just be thrilled. It's
funny you bring up the owner, because there's been so much news in the recent weeks about the situation with the Timberwolves and their ownership. Will the Twins have a new ownership group here in the next few months or years over there at Target Field? And you can say what you want about all these teams, but the one thing you and I both know, having spent enough time around Craig Leopold, is it is his biggest passion in life outside of his family to get this team to the Stanley Cup and to bring that back to Minnesota. And if anyone doesn't believe me, I will tell you this: once a year, we're all invited to spend an evening in the owner's box during a preseason game. And to watch him watch a preseason hockey game answers every question in terms of his passion for this hockey team.
I have had the good fortune since I started working here to spend some more time with Craig. And not only is he just a good human being, if you haven't had a chance to meet him, he's the same guy that you see on the media as he is here. He is a man of the people. He is great to his employees and believes that everybody that works with him, that we're a family, and he takes care of everybody like that. So I'll get that out there first. Craig loves to win, and he hates to lose. And he will tell you that. I just hate to lose, whether it's a preseason game or the final game of the playoffs. The man doesn't like to lose. And so you're right. Watching a game with him can be stressful. I've not had a chance, and frankly, I don't think that I want to sit with him during a regular season game, because he is intense. But if you ask him, you ask him flat out, and I've seen it asked 100 times. Craig, what's your biggest goal? What do you want to do? You've done all this. What else eludes you? He will tell you without a blink, I want to win the Stanley Cup. I have to win a Stanley Cup. Minnesota has got to win a Stanley Cup. It is always his number one top priority every year. And I don't think that's going to change one bit until it happens.
I'm with you all the way. So this is Wooden Sticks. We like to kick it back old school. So to take us back, as far as you can remember, to when you were just a little guy, where did your love for sports start? How did it kind of come together, and how did you end up here? Like, take us through the entire background of little Dave Schwartz growing up.
Little Dave Schwartz. As long as I can remember, I played sports. I was a swimmer. which was kind of interesting because if anyone's known me or seen me, and as I told my mother when I wanted to stop swimming, Mom, sometimes God gives people swimming bodies, and then other times God gives people hockey player bodies. I don't have a swimmer's body. I am not
Me
6'4". I'm not long and lanky, KG, I'm not. And so I convinced my mother, she was afraid I was going to get hurt, so she didn't want me to play hockey. I'm like, I want to play hockey. So I played hockey all the way up. I still skate once a week. I loved hockey, played football a little bit. I wasn't very good at it. I pretty much, I think at one point in my high school career, because I went to a small high school in New York where you could try every sport and not worry about getting cut. I think I played every sport. I did track and field. I did tennis. I did soccer. I had a short stint at cross country. I'm not really sure why. I wrestled and I was awful at that too. But I just liked to compete. That's just who I was. I enjoyed competition. I enjoyed the battle of, okay, you take your best stuff, I'll take mine, and we'll just see who finishes out on the top. And so eventually I found hockey when I was 11, and I just fell in love with it. I loved everything about the game. I loved the feeling when you're flying around the ice and that the wind's in your face and you're looking around, when the play starts to develop. I loved that. I loved scoring. I loved being able to set up plays. What I really loved is the physical nature of hockey. It's what I ended up really enjoying as I got older into high school. Played a little bit of juniors, but not too much because it kind of just was like, well, do I want to try to keep playing juniors or do I want to just go on with the rest of my life? Because I was playing low-level juniors and I probably wasn't going to go much more. So went to a small D3 college in upstate New York called Hobart College, which is actually, they're really good now. The 4 years, it tells you how bad I was. The 4 years I was there, they won 4 games the entire time. So I tried out for the team. I didn't make it. I went to the first tryout and decided that the only way I was going to make this team, because, when I was in high school, I was big, I could hit, that's enough to keep you on varsity and keep you on a pretty good line. But when you get to college, everybody's big, everybody can hit, and they're all really skilled and really fast. So I'm like, all right, the only way I'm going to make this team is if I take out the biggest guy, right? It's like what's the story? You get in the prison yard and you punch the biggest guy in the face. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take out the biggest guy. And he was coming up the boards in our little scrimmage. I tried to hit him. He initiated the contact, hit me so hard, he knocked me over the boards into the bench. My knee swelled up and I got cut the next day. True story. So, it ended up being the best thing for me. I ended up going to the radio station, started calling games, and really fell in love with it. Fell in love with being able to use my words and paint those pictures to give people and provide a service. A lot of, especially at the Division III level, and at this time in 1998, the Stone Ages, there was no streaming. I don't even know if there was internet back then, to be honest with you. It was radio. And so these kids' parents wanted to hear. They were all across the country, couldn't watch all the games, so they wanted to hear it. So I ended up calling hockey games for 4 years, loved it. Called football for 4 years, lacrosse for 4 years. I ended up doing radio for every single sport that we had at one point and really found a love for that. So my general manager, my radio station said, hey, you're good at this, but the money's in television. So if you want to go into TV, that's what you should do. And I said, okay. So I went to Syracuse, got my master's, got into TV. My first job was in Bemidji, Minnesota. It was my first experience in Minnesota, in the state of hockey. And I fell in love with the place, even in Bemidji. It was a small town, but there was 4 or 5 different men's leagues. Great people. And you could join men's leagues, no problem. So in fact, on my interview, my news director said to me, do you want to play on my men's league team? And I said, yeah, sure. He said, oh, you're hired. Great. So I got to sign up, had a great time up there, met great people, just loved it, fell in love with the state, left for 4 years to go to Shreveport, Louisiana, then came back as soon as I could and did for 14, 15 years at KARE 11 and covering hockey in the state of hockey was incredible. I've never lost my love for the game. I still love to watch it. I still love to play it. I coach it. I've coached my son's team since he was a squirt. And he's a second-year Bantam now, so this is our last year together. And I don't know, there's just something about hockey that's different. It takes all, whatever it is, 23, 24 guys. Everybody has to have the same goal, but understand that they have different roles to get it done. And that just speaks to me. It just speaks to me that you're a scorer, you're not a scorer, you're a hitter, you're this, you're that. But we're all going the same way, because if we don't have everybody doing their jobs, we can't win it all. And to circle back around, like, that's how you compete. Sometimes you compete on your own, but sometimes you got to hope that guy right next to you is going to compete just as hard for that same goal. And I just love that about the sport of hockey, and I've never stopped loving it.
I got to tell you, going from where you were in New York, and even if you were in upstate New York, to make that transition to Bemidji, Minnesota, what, like, your first impressions? I know by the time you were done there, you loved it, and the people there are really, truly fantastic human beings. But the culture shock from where you were coming to Bemidji, I think of what was that movie with Michael J. Fox, where he's a New York doctor and he ends up in that small Doc Hollywood, right? Was that it?
Yes.
I think of you coming to Bemidji and being like, how the hell did I get here?
I remember the first time my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, my wife and I, we drove down, and people listening who know it, I think it's Highway 2, right? That goes across from Duluth all the way over to Bemidji. And I remember it was very gray, which, it was, I actually think it was in the summertime, because I think I started in June.
Okay.
It was very gray, and I just remember it was so flat. I'm like, are there any hills? You're just driving straight. But honestly, I felt home. Everybody in Minnesota loved hockey like I loved hockey.
Right.
And I grew up in New York, where, hockey was not a big deal in New York yet in 1998. There was one junior team. It was an elite league junior team in Albany. My high school didn't even have hockey, so I had to play on a club team, which is basically kind of our version of junior gold. So I went from, but I was hockey crazed. I loved hockey. I had a couple friends growing up. We were pretty tight, and we all loved it. But it wasn't everywhere like it is here. And so to go to Minnesota, where, hockey's everything. There's skating on the pond as soon as it freezes. You can jump into any rink at any time and watch high school kids who, any one of them are going to be D1 athletes and maybe NHLers. So I fell in love with it. And I'm an outdoorsy guy. So I loved being outdoors. It's beautiful country up there. Itasca State Park, and did a lot of fishing with my friends up there. So it was a culture. I'll tell you, the bigger culture shock, Kev, was me going from Bemidji to Shreveport, Louisiana. That was a culture shock. Talk about flipping your world upside,
right?
Yeah, you're flipping your world upside down.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hockey. It's football, probably crazy. That's a big change.
It was football crazy. At the time, it was the CHL, which I don't even think is around anymore. We had a team there, which was awesome, because I covered them better than anybody else, and because the rest of the sports people in town didn't even know what hockey was, except the guy who called the games, who is a name that you might know now if you know the name Steve Mears. He's now doing radio, I think, for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He and I worked together.
I've met him. Yes.
Yeah. So he and I know each other. He called the Mudbugs games, the Bossier Shreveport Mudbugs. Yeah. And I would end up, on my dinner break, you'd go out and shoot video. And then I would always usually, during the first and second period, I'd go up and help him fill, because he was a one-man show. So I'd help him fill it. And now he's doing great. Which is great, because I love Steve. He's a great human being.
Super good guy. Yeah. Always has time
great at his
you.
Job. Yep.
So when you were growing up, were you an Islanders guy? Was that your club, or are you even too young to remember their great run to those 4 straight Stanley Cups?
I know their run. I was not around for it. I was a Rangers fan.
Gotcha.
But I became a Rangers fan because Gretzky became there. So I was a Gretzky. I used to send him birthday cards when I was a kid. January 26th is his birthday. I sent him birthday cards.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, I loved him. So when he was with the Kings, I was a Kings fan, and we got to go see him. I actually got to go see him play in Madison Square Garden. He wasn't with the Rangers yet, but he was with the Kings. My cousin got us tickets, and I got to run down to the glass. I remember this very vividly still. I was 14. went down to the glass on the Kings end, and there was nobody there because everyone was around the Rangers end wanting to see all the Rangers guys. And Gretzky came around. He's got the hair flowing, comes around the top of the zone on his warm up, and looked up, saw the Kings jersey, and winked at me. And I remember, I flew back to my seat. I was like, I floated on clouds back to my seat. My mother looks at me and she goes, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I go, "Mom, I just saw Gretzky and he winked at me." And she's like, and she just laughed, like I was just on cloud nine. So I followed him. I was not a fan when he went to the Blues for that half a season because I don't like the Blues. But once he became a Ranger, I think it was the last 2 years of his career, I was a Ranger fan. Then I stayed with the Rangers after he left.
Well, and obviously Madison Square Garden, the blue shirts, you've got a team that gets you in the mix, it seems like and feels like every single year. And I got to be honest, when I've been doing this for a long time, I get asked all the time, what's your very favorite road city, road venue? It's the same. It's New York. It's Madison Square Garden. Every single time the Wild schedule comes out at the end of summer, and the first thing I do, Schwartzy, is I find the game in Madison Square Garden. And this year, I really got lucky because we're out there for a week. We start in Jersey, we come down to Manhattan, we play the Rangers, and we go out to the island to play the Islanders. It just so happens that we're doing the front end and the back end on FanDuel Sports Network, and the middle game is a Wednesday night game on TNT. So I got friends coming out. We're gonna go to the game as fans, and I'm only jealous. Attended one thing as a fan. I've worked in that building every year for 19 years, but I've only been there once as a fan. It was about 8 years ago. Our esteemed longtime producer covering Wild hockey, John Stroh, had tickets to the Billy Joel show. And I got to tell you, seeing Billy Joel at that spot was incredible.
I love that building. I have not been back there since I was 14. And my son now, who is also 14, we've talked many times about going back. It was probably 3 years ago. We were home during the playoffs, and the Rangers were playing Game 5. I forget who it was, but we were looking at tickets. He's like, "Dad, can we go?" And I looked, I'm like, "Bud, they're like $300 just to get in the door. So probably not." But I really want to take him back there sometime. I do love that arena. I have not been magical, back. I never had the chance to work there.
Magical.
It is.
You walk in that building, I don't care what night of the week it is, that game feels like the biggest game on the planet. It's remarkable. I've watched hockey everywhere, all over the world. There is nothing like watching a game at Madison Square Garden.
It's, for me, it's the ceiling. It's that, and I don't know what it is. It's just the way that it's the multicolor, the way it hangs, the way the lights hang. I don't know. It just has new world comfort, but the charm of what the arenas used to look like. This the big show, the seat, the huge seats that kind of sit over top of the ice. I just love it. And it just has a really cool feel.
So let's talk about your time at KARE 11, because I think a lot of our listeners, when they hear Dave Schwartz, they think of those 14 or 15 years in this market working on that station. And I think of you and Eric Perkins and Randy Shaver and the institution that you guys were at KARE, and being able to bring local sports. And I'm not talking about the Wild or the Wolves. I'm talking about the high school sports and the coverage that you guys brought some of those local athletes. What are some of your favorite memories? Gosh,
there's so many, a lot, but I think people would always feel like, oh, it must have been, this playoff game or the Super Bowl or this, that, or the other thing. I watched the Super Bowl in 2018, the one that was here, from across the street in an office building. People don't realize, and I'm sure you've had these experiences too, people don't realize that when the biggest shows, the biggest games come to town, the seats aren't always available. Right. I remember I went to Yankee Stadium for a Twins-Yankees playoff series, and we were not given seats that could see the field. We had to sit back, so like sometimes you get bopped around. So all that to be said is those aren't always my favorite memories. I will say some of the things that always stick out to me happen from the Olympics.
Has to be.
The 20, Yeah, the games in South Korea in 2018 when the curling team won gold, John Schuster and his squad, and John, who I got to know really well over those 4 years from getting to know him from 2014 all the way through 18. And everything he went through, he really the curling fans will remember that in 2014, Team USA had a terrible showing. John and his team, they finished near the bottom. They were out even before the medal rounds, to the point that they basically said, all right, you guys are out of the high performance program. We're going to put together a new team next time. And curling is such that you can form your own teams and then go qualify for the national Olympic qualifiers and go. And that's exactly what John did. So he got all his guys together, Matt Hamilton and Tyler George, and I'm going to forget the John Landsteiner's others. And they worked their way back through to get to the national qualifiers, and then they won it to go to the Olympics. And it was amazing to me. They kind of fought their way back. Then they go to the Olympics, and they have a stinker those first few matches. And they're almost, ready to be done before they even get anywhere again. Schuster has this epiphany while he's walking through Olympic Park with his family that he just has to go enjoy it and stop trying to do more than he can do. Just go enjoy it, be a part of it. And he always used the term like write your own ending, which he took from Dan Jansen, the speed skater, many years before, who also had many kind of lackluster performances before he won his medal. It took him a long time. So they come out the next day and all of a sudden they go on this incredible run to win gold, including the match where he scores 5 points in the eighth end to win this incredible. And I was there for it. And I just, it's different when it's not a pro athlete. It's different when this is just a guy who has worked his way through it while he's trying to raise his kids and family and get a job. They're just guys and women who love the sport. They're not doing it for fame or fortune. And so you really get attached to those stories. And so I think that's why those always stick out to me more than anything else, is that John Schuster, had everything going against him, but he fought his way back and his whole team fought their way back. And they end up taking gold in 2018. And that was awesome. And then there's so many other stories. A lot of them. I remember the first time I walked into the high school hockey tournament for the first time at the Xcel Energy Center. It was crazy.
Yes.
A kid that grew up playing hockey, and there were never more than 5 people in the stands, other than, they were all parents. To walk in and see on a Saturday night, 19,000 people watching Edina and Eden Prairie, or, Edina and Benilde, or whatever the matchup is. It was incredible. And it was, so those are things that when I think back on my career, that I'm like, man, I was really fortunate to be able to see and witness those things, and not only not have to pay for a ticket, but I got paid to do it.
Right.
I'm really grateful. That's what I leave with, is just a grateful heart for having that much time to be able to tell stories to the amazing people of Minnesota about all the great sports that we have in our town.
It's funny you bring that up, because it feels like every year there's a new young player on the Wild roster that gets to experience the state tournament for the first time. And we always are on the road during the early stages of the tournament, but we always seem to come back in time to play a Sunday home game when the tournament wraps up. Well, that normally means you're playing on a Friday and you're home on championship Saturday. And so a lot of times the younger players that don't have families will spend that off day going to the rink and watching the state tournament. And to see young guys experience that for the first time, a Matt Boldy who grew up out east, and certainly they have some big time hockey in Massachusetts. And, he talked about the Bean Pot, which I got to watch last week in Boston, and had a great time doing it. But to see a high school tournament, it blows these guys away, to see that actually play out in front of 19,000 people. To me, it's the pomp and circumstance. It's the bands, it's the kids, it's the face paint. It's walking around that building and getting a feel for what that tournament, that's the secret sauce to me that makes that tournament just so incredible. And I love when NHL guys who have been playing in front of 19,000 people their entire lives get to see a high school tournament, how much it affects them. It really reminds us all here how spoiled we are in Minnesota to have that every March.
And it's so, the other thing that it represents that isn't everywhere. It's unique to Minnesota in many ways, is that these teams, these kids from Cloquet and Grand Rapids, that's their dream growing up. They don't necessarily dream of the NHL. They dream of playing for their high school, because from the first time they put on their sweater in Grand Rapids Association, they're playing at the same rinks with all their buddies, and they don't have to go elsewhere, and they don't have to travel, to these far out tournaments. Is that you're not playing for a business. You're playing for your association and your town. And I think that's what makes hockey in Minnesota unique. That, my kids, we're in Chaska, and my kids have always played for Chaska. And so my son's like, yep, I want to play for Chaska High School. And it means something to play for Chaska High School because you watch them all the way up. And so that's where it's really unique, is it's the community hockey model that you really buy into and you follow, and then you get there and it's like, it's really an honor that you get to play for your high school, because let's be honest, not everyone's going to play in the NHL. Very few people do. So the more attainable goal is to put on that high school sweater. And so when you get to do it, and then if you're the good fortune of coming out of the tunnel to 19,000 fans, it's amazing. Especially, and even if you're from a small town, right? You're from a Northfield or a Laverne, the entire town shuts down so they can come into St. Paul, and it's magical. It is, and it means something to them more so than if you just played for some travel team out east.
And think about this. I've had this conversation with Neil Broughton over the years. Here's a guy that scored the game-winning goal to win an NCAA championship for the Golden Gophers against North Dakota, by the way, their biggest rival. Here's a guy that was a part of Miracle on Ice, the greatest sporting event of most of everybody's lives that grew up in that era. And he also won a Stanley Cup. But when he talks about the impact it had on him as a person, he said the most emotional he ever got was the first time he and his buddies at Roseau, with his brothers playing with him, got to win a section final and punch their ticket to the state tournament. He said, at that point in my life, it doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any better. And to your point, to see the entire town celebrate that, shut the town down, all head down to St. Paul. He said, you can't beat that. I don't care what you do after it. You can't beat it. And he's right.
Yeah, when you put on a jersey, and this isn't to take anything away for the pride that all these NHLers have, I'm sure of it. But when you put on a Columbus Blue Jackets jersey for the first time at 23, you're like, wow, an NHL jersey, this means a lot. But if you're in Roseau, you've been wearing a Roseau jersey since you were 5 years old. And now all of a sudden you get your own. It just has a different feel to it, I think. And I've heard the same thing from many NHLers. Playing in NHL arenas is incredible. It's the best of the best. But playing for your town that you grew up in, that all of your teachers, your librarians, your mechanics, all these people that you knew growing up, and they've all come down now to watch you represent your town. It's just got a special flair to it, and it makes it mean more, I think.
We're going to get to the hat trick hot seat momentarily, but just briefly, for all the people that honestly that loved watching you at Care 11 and spent 15 years inviting you into their living room every night, what are you doing right now for the Minnesota Wild?
So I'm the senior manager of communications and engagement. My job is basically so a few years ago, our executive level vice presidents listened to our employees and decided that they needed internal communications. They needed to be able to have a flow of information go from the core of our company to everywhere else, because we have all of our hockey team, we have all of our venues, we have our Iowa affiliate, and it's hard to get information to everybody. And information is key, right? If you're informed on what's going on in your company, then you're more apt to want to do hard work for your company because you understand the direction we're going. You understand what our values are. And so it's important for that. So I help everybody in the company stay informed on what goes on. I still get to tell stories of people in our company, which I love. I also get to do things and help out with things that just make this a good place to work, which is great. And then I help out externally with every now and then some PR stuff. I host things for our season ticket member events and all that. They give me something new to do every day, but I love it. It's a fun place to work. And if you think that the culture of the Wild in the locker room is great, it's just as good everywhere else in the company. That starts with Craig. He leads this company in a way in which it's just a really wonderful place to be. And he cares about his employees. And so all the employees care about each other. And it is truly one of the greatest places I've ever worked. And I'm just grateful to be here.
Yeah, they're lucky to have you. I'll say that. And I think, being around the office, being around the rink, you're spot on. Everybody loves their job, loves to be around. There's a vibe there where people genuinely enjoy being around each other. We've worked some of those youth hockey spotlight games together. We've done different events, the kickoff party. People are always, it feels like they're all on the same page. And that's not easy to do. You've worked for many years in other markets and in other jobs. It's not easy to get everybody on the same page, but Craig has cultivated that. And I think that's a part of the success this organization certainly has had. Now let's get to the hat trick hot seat. Now we get to kind of pull the curtain back and learn a little bit more about Dave Schwartz. And some of these I'm very curious on. And I'm going to start with this one. My first question would be, you've been all over the world, and whether it's Olympic coverage, just different jobs you've had, what is the coolest place you've been on a work trip? Because I think your work trips are a lot different than a lot of our listeners.
The coolest place I ever got to go was Pyeongchang, South Korea. And I remember I celebrated one of my birthdays there. I don't remember which one it was. And we were eating Korean barbecue. The Olympics had just ended. I was there with my work friends that work in stations all over the country. We had Korean barbecue. The beverages were flowing freely, and it was just an awesome time. We did karaoke at 2:00 in the morning, and I'll leave the rest of that there. But it was so much fun. So that was easy to say that my favorite work trip.
What's your go-to song, karaoke?
Gosh, that's a great question. It's been so long. I don't know if anything from the 80s. I love 80s music. Anything from the 80s I can usually sing.
You can't go wrong with the 80s because you can just scream and belt it out. Yeah, well, there you go. Now we're
Living
talking.
on a Prayer, of course. Living on a Prayer, Bon Jovi. That's one we used to do in college.
I love it. All right. Favorite sports movie of all time? It's hard to pick just one, but if you had to go with your all-time favorite sports movie, which would it be?
I just got to watch this with my son, Rocky IV.
Wow.
I love Rocky
really?
IV. I love Rocky IV, not just because of the storyline, but the characters. There was never a better villain than Dolph Lundgren.
I agree with that.
And he was just straight out of, it was just perfect. And it was at a time when, the uncertainty with world powers and to me, and people laugh at me when I say this, I thought it was a cinematic masterpiece because you knew what was going to happen, but you still you're like, oh gosh, maybe this is the time Rocky doesn't actually win. And so I loved that movie. I watched it with my son before one of our hockey games. I'm like, you got to watch this before the game. You'll get really pumped up. And boy, he was ready to go after the game, after the movie, but it was fun. That one.
They've got, Burning Heart and it's really, it's very under the radar, but I would agree it's one of my very favorite sports movies, and it's the precursor to the worst of all time, Rocky, in Rocky V. That one is unwatchable, and I when I see it on cable, I click away in a blink. If it's any other Rocky, and I mean it, any other one, I can't stop watching. So I love your pick. I do. It's a sneaky tout, and I love it. Okay, now this is the final one, and this is a question that's kind of a staple on the show here because I really think this gives us a window into at least the younger version of Dave Schwartz. I want to know the first concert you attended. I want to know the band you went to see and the venue in which they were playing.
The first concert I ever attended, this is going to date me, so that's okay, was
that's
the Beach Boys. Yeah, the Beach Boys at a place called SPAC. It was Saratoga Performing Arts Center.
Now you're talking.
And I know that you're a racing guy, Kip.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's an open air venue, and we got to go see the Beach Boys. But my mother, I was real young. my mother stuffed cotton balls in my ears so that the sound wouldn't bother me. And we couldn't get the cotton balls out after. So we eventually did, but it was like a core memory for me that I don't like putting things in my ears still to this day.
And in our line of work over the years in TV with the IFB, you're always sticking those suckers in your ear. And you're probably having flashbacks to those cotton balls. You likely ran into a cute girl. You were hoping to get some digits, and she saw the cotton and she ran. And it was a disaster.
I was probably like 6 or 7, and I don't know how many other girls were there patrolling at a Beach Boys concert. But yes, I would only use the molded IFBs. I could never use the little generic ones because it went too far in. I couldn't do it, man. Couldn't do it. I've done shows without IFBs because I didn't have my own. And I'm like, nope, can't put anything in my ears.
It's funny. Our parents dragged my sisters and I to a concert when we were young, like you, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. It was the Oak Ridge Boys. And, when you're that age, you only want songs that you can sing along to. And we knew one song. It was Elvira. At that time, it was their biggest hit. It was on the radio all the time. So we sit through this concert and we're just miserable for like an hour and 45 minutes. And then they finally play Elvira and we jump up out of our seats and we're belting the song. But I'll never forget it because for an hour and 45 minutes, the three of us were like, why are we here?
They're playing new stuff, anyway, right? Like enough new stuff. Play the good ones.
Exactly. Awesome stuff, Schwartzy. I got to tell you, I hope that we're together for that parade, whether we have to.
Oh, that would be fun.
Maybe, take one of those floats and kidnap it. But I believe it's going to happen. I had Matt Maka on the show about 2 months ago, and I asked him about that dream because he's been here from day one. Yep. And, you've mentioned Craig a lot, and behind the scenes how much Matt Maka does for this organization and really how much passion he has. Another guy that if you ever watch a Wild game with him, you'll understand deeply how much these guys care. And I think from a fan's perspective, that's good. And that came out in our conversation. But we talked about that parade, and I just picture it late June, 75, 80 degrees, and Minnesota being this state that just loves hockey and loves a great party. I don't think you'll find a bigger or better party. I know that this is a Vikings town, and I get that. And I lived through a couple of World Series championships where I was in college at St. Thomas, and it was incredible. But I'm going to tell you right now, there will be nothing like the party that a Stanley Cup brings to St. Paul.
I agree with everything you said, and Matt's a wonderful human being, and I have allowed myself to think about that parade. I can often picture it. I picture the floats coming down West 7th and turning onto Kellogg as they come right in front of the XL Energy Center and then finishing in Rice Park on a beautiful day overlooking the river. I don't think about it often because I'm afraid to let myself go there. But boy, that does sound like a magical time, doesn't it?
It's going to happen. I believe it. I honestly, as I sit here right now and it's 8 below zero and we're recording this, and I believe it's going to happen. I believe this is the group. I believe Kirill is the guy. And I can't wait to celebrate with you. And we'll even let Fallness tag along. I know it's going to be painful.
That's fine.
But we got to let Fallness come with us as well. Hey, Schwartzy, I'll look for you at the rink when we get back to it here in a couple of weeks. And really appreciate your time today.
You're the best, KG. Happy to do it.
That's Dave Schwartz here on Wooden Stick. We're back to put a close on the show next. Okay, we are back to close the show, and special announcement here in the final segment today on Wooden Sticks, recording again from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We're nice and cozy here. It's a warm 70 degrees as we record this show, even though it's 6, 8, 10 below on the outside. We've got a big party to invite you to, and it's going to be Saturday, the 22nd of February. We just heard from Insight Brewing, and this is going to be a new once-a-month tradition here on the podcast. We're going to take our show out there live, like Russo and LaPanta have done on Worst Seats. We're going to have some fun. We're going to get to connect with hockey fans throughout the market here. And Insight Brewing over in Northeast Minneapolis is the spot that we're going to be here on Saturday the 22nd. The cool part is it's a nationally televised game for the Minnesota Wild, so I don't have to be in Detroit working that hockey game. I get to host a watch party at Insight Brewing. It's going to start at 10:30. We're going to feature Alex Stalock, who's been on the show, who now works with us at FanDuel Sports Network, who, yes, grew up playing local high school hockey at South St. Paul, went on to play at UMD, and then had a brilliant career in the National Hockey League. If you know Alex, and you've probably heard the show here on a podcast gone by, he's got tremendous personality. We're going to get to sit down and watch Wild hockey with Al. We're going to have a chance to reflect on, at that time, how this Four Nations face-off plays out. And you're going to get to try some of the greatest brews in the Twin Cities. There's going to be a wooden stick brew that we're going to unveil at this party. There's going to be food trucks. There's going to be trivia. There's going to be prizes. And oh yeah, Wild hockey is going to be back. It's their first game after this 2-week hiatus. It's a huge game in Detroit. They made that coaching change. They've been one of the hottest teams in the Eastern Conference. The Wild have been rolling in the West. So yeah, it's going to be a party. Mark it down, 10:30 a.m., Saturday the 22nd. So as you digest this show right now, this weekend, we're a week away from the show. You can follow me. I'll have a bunch of updates for you at Gorgomatic21 on X or Twitter. And you can also follow Inside Brewing for all the updates that they're going to have for this tremendous party. Come say hi to Alex Stalock. Come over and enjoy the show. 10:30 a.m., Saturday the 22nd at Inside Brewing. And enjoy this weekend what should be some great high school hockey locally, some tremendous action from the Four Nations face-off. If you're catching this podcast probably on the weekend, know that there's a doubleheader on Saturday that features Finland and Sweden at noon our time in the cornfields, and then the big showdown, maybe a precursor to the championship. Saturday night, U.S. takes on Canada. They switch over from Montreal to Boston, so they have a Sunday travel day. Monday, we get another double dip with Finland against Canada and the U.S. taking on Sweden. For all of us as Wild fans, Monday night is going to be pretty special because it's Brodin and Faber on one side, and it's Boldy and Faber on one side. It's Brodin, Eck, and Gustafsson on the other side, Monday at 7 o'clock. And then they tally the points, 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss. Add up the points. The two best teams play on Thursday, the 20th of February, 7 o'clock. That, of course, will be at TD Garden in Boston. And then, of course, after you watch that championship game, you make plans to join us for a live edition of Wooden Sticks, Saturday the 22nd, 10:30 a.m., featuring Al Stalock at Inside Brewing. I can't wait to see you. Thanks again for listening. And once again, if you need any updates on all of these activities, at Gorgomatic21, and we'll get you over to Inside Brewing for our first live show a week from Saturday.